At midnight on Thursday, after months of fits and starts, President Trump's steep new tariffs went into effect on nearly 100 American trading partners.
Since the 1st of August, the United States has been rolling out some of the most aggressive tariff measures in decades, and they are now reaching into both the luxury market and the basic necessities of American life.
The president really touting the deals that he struck with the European Union, with other countries as well, but he also talked about one country whose tariff rates might change before that implementation date on Thursday.
Economists, business owners, even members of the president's own party warn the sweeping levies will raise prices for American consumers on a long list of goods.
So we settled on 25%, but I think I'm going to raise that very substantially over the next 24 hours because they're buying Russian oil, they're fueling the war machine, and if they're going to do that, then I'm not going to be happy.
The headlines make it sound abstract. Percentage points, trade partners, and policy language. But in the real world, it shows up in the ring on a finger and the wood frame of a home. President Donald Trump's trade doctrine has turned Indian diamonds and Canadian lumber into test cases for his second-term economic strategy, and the costs are starting to land squarely in the laps of American households. YouTube is not the biggest fan of content like this, but we believe people deserve to hear the truth. If you agree, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us beat the algorithm and keep going. Two flashpoints stand out. Indian goods, including most of the diamonds that enter the United States, now carry a 50% tariff.
And all of this, of course, predicated on a stunning move that has made the prime-time breaking news this evening. US President Donald Trump announcing a 50% tariff on Indian exports to the United States.
Canadian softwood lumber, already a source of friction for years, now faces duties above 35%.
In a letter addressed to Prime Minister Mark Carney and posted on social media, Trump said the U.S. will charge Canada a tariff of 35% on Canadian products sent into the United States.
The White House sells these moves as leverage, pressure meant to extract better trade terms. But the math on the ground tells a different story. India cuts and polishes around 90% of the world's diamonds. That's not changing anytime soon. In early August, tariffs on Indian goods jumped from 25% to 50%.
The US decision to impose 50% tariffs on India would come as a shock at certain levels, but the key question is whether the 21-day period which exists before this is actually implemented is going to be a period within which there is some compromise, some negotiation which happens between both sides.
Officially over India's continued purchase of Russian oil.
Donald Trump, the US president, has decided to raise tariffs on India. Trump has just posted on his Truth social site, India is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil, they are then, for much of the oil purchased, selling it on the open market for big profits.
In New York's Diamond District, jewelers say they can't absorb that kind of increase. At 10%, suppliers and customers could share the hit. At 50%, retail prices must rise, and rise fast. Just as the holiday season approaches, gold is already trading at record highs, roughly double its price from a few years ago. Put those together, and engagement rings and fine jewelry are moving out of reach for many buyers. Some talk about traveling abroad to sidestep the tariffs, but that's a fantasy for most. The more common reality is delayed purchases or settling for alternatives like lab-grown stones, a market that was already growing. The lumber story is different in product, but identical in consequence. The total rate on Canadian softwood is now 35.19%. The Ontario Forest Industries Association cites research showing it adds about $6,000 to the cost of building a single-family home in the United States. That number doesn't live on a spreadsheet. It lands on families already stretching for a mortgage. It lands on people rebuilding after fires or hurricanes. Ottawa responded, before the announcement was even made, with a $1.22 billion Canadian dollar package for its industry, including $700 million in loan guarantees to keep mills open, and $500 million to diversify markets and products. From jewelry counters to construction sites, these tariffs are reshaping the American marketplace. The Yale Budget Lab estimates the 2025 package could add thousands of dollars to the average household's yearly expenses. Trump's circle sees this as a high-stakes negotiation tactic. Canada, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, is reinforcing targeted industries, keeping retaliation measured, and moving quickly to lock in new trade lanes in Europe and Asia. On August 7th, US Customs began collecting a new wave of import duties, 10% to 50%, covering more than 60 countries. Brazil was hit with 50%, Switzerland 39%, Laos and Myanmar 40%. The European Union, Japan and South Korea got 15 under renegotiated deals. The United Kingdom pays 10%. The administration has floated a 100% tariff on foreign-made computer chips, with exemptions for companies that build in the United States. Apple pledged a $100 billion US investment, but the chip tariff is still on paper. Tariffs at these levels haven't been seen in centuries. Trump posted online that billions in duties are flowing into the United States. The Yale numbers translate that into about $2,400 a year for the average family. By July, Washington had already collected over $150 billion from existing tariffs. Economists point out that the money doesn't come from foreign treasuries, it comes from US importers, who pass it on in the form of higher prices. June's CPI was already showing rising costs for appliances, clothing, and furniture. India's jump from 25% to 50% is officially about Russian oil, but the fallout will be felt in diamond sales, jewelry manufacturing, and even small-scale retailers who cater to special occasion purchases. South Africa is warning of job losses as US tariffs strip away advantages, forcing exporters to seek thinner margins in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. Canada has been under its own set of new pressures since August 1st, with tariffs on non-USMCA goods raised to 35%. Over 85% of bilateral trade remains tariff-free, but the targeted sectors – softwood, steel, aluminum, some manufactured goods – feel the bite. Ontario is both a major grain producer and a major grain buyer, the top customer for farmers in as many as 40 US states. With the new rates, some of Ontario's exports are bypassing US buyers for Europe. That helps Canada diversify, but it puts US farmers at risk of losing a steady customer. Carney's message to premiers after meeting in Ottawa: keep talks with Washington open, avoid locking in bad deals, shield domestic industries from immediate harm. He's floated removing some Canadian counter-tariffs if it benefits key sectors. Provincial leaders disagree on tactics. Ontario's Doug Ford wants tariff-for-tariff measures. Saskatchewan's Scott Moe favors lowering counter-tariffs to cut domestic costs. Trade experts say, keep retaliation in the toolbox, but don't escalate without cause. Carney is also leaning on marquee industrial projects to keep momentum. Volkswagen's $7 billion Canadian battery plant in St. Thomas is still on track. Other procurement is under strain. Amherstburg's fire chief cites a 3-year wait and higher costs for a US-made fire truck due to tariffs and shortages. In Washington, Trump's tariff blitz has widened beyond North America. Brazil took the steepest hit, 50% on all exports, up from 10% in April. Trump tied it to what he called political persecution of former President Jair Bolsonaro. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva rejected it outright, authorized counter-tariffs, and pointed out that only 12% of Brazil's exports go to the United States. Oil, orange juice, coffee, steel, all can be redirected. Lula has signaled a deeper pivot to BRICS and Asia. The moves are being read across the hemisphere. In Colombia, ties have soured after allegations linking US figures to political plotting. Trump recalled the ambassador and threatened to revoke drug cooperation certification, risking aid. President Gustavo Petro has pushed back, exploring BRICS financing to loosen dependency on Washington. Across Latin America, the pattern is the same: diversify trade, reduce political exposure, limit vulnerability to US pressure. In North America, Canada and Mexico are closing ranks rather than cutting separate deals. In Europe and Asia, even allies are quietly preparing to live without favored access to US markets. For Trump, the optics at home may still work, a president using tariffs to stand up for America. But the long-term costs are growing: eroded trust, diplomatic capital spent down, and supply chains finding ways to route around the United States. The real measure of this policy won't just be what the tariffs collect, it will be what they drive away.